It's time, Fort Wayne. Your sports, your station. It's the Sports Rush with Brett Rump.
Max Landis.
Covering all the topics that hit a nerve here in the Summit City.
Clark goes 11 yards, touchdown.
Only on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Now here's your host, Brett Rump.
The greatest, most interesting, most important person of all time.
You are incredible! Older than one. Yeah, well, you're half right. What is this, amateur hour?
This is going to be huge.
I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just when I think you've said the stupidest thing ever, you keep talking.
I think that's the worst thing I've ever heard.
That boy ain't right.
The simplest way to put it, I have problems.
Welcome to the alleged show.
Y'all ready for this?
Thank God it's...
Just a gray day with a fog that will not lift. It is nothing but wet today on a Friday as we head into a sports weekend with a sports rush. Glad to have you on board. I am Brett Rump along with Adam Lundy, and we've got you connected on the Parkview Sports Medicine text line at 260-447-8500. Questions, comments, or suggestions, 260-447-8500. Big show as we get into the weekend. We've, of course, got high school basketball tonight. We've got a showdown in the Summit Athletic Conference. This could decide who wins the SAC. The Wayne Generals hosting the Bishop Luers Knights. Tons of talent in this game. Can't wait to be out at Wayne calling the action around 7:30 tonight. And then after the game, I hope you join us for the Parkview Sports Medicine post-game show live at the Waynedale Pizza Hut. We'll be out there until 10:30 tonight, and then we'll turn it over to Coach Bob Lovell for Indiana Sports Talk. So it's a packed night of high school sports tonight. Now, if you're looking for college basketball, and there is kind of a special game for our area because you've got Indiana at Purdue, and we've got coverage from both Indiana and Purdue. You'll have Indiana at 92.3 FM, WOWO Radio on the FM, 92.3 FM for Don Fisher and Indiana with their perspective. And then Purdue is going to just trot down the hall and land on WOWO AM.
Perfect.
1190. You'll find the Purdue broadcast tonight. And so you still have your options for Purdue, Indiana, and high school basketball all right here because we are committed to being Fort Wayne's sports station.
Our airwaves are like a buffet of basketball tonight, my friend.
Yes.
I mean, we've got 3 different options, and you can choose any of them. But we want to hear you on the basketball stream, the high school basketball stream tonight. Yeah. We want you tuned in there.
Yeah. Do you want the hot? Do you want the sweet and sour? Do you want the spicy? I mean, what do you want?
Oh, we
got it all.
I'm taking all of them.
I think IU would be the spicy. If you had to give a flavor, the high school basketball game tonight, Luers Wayne, what flavor do they get?
Ooh,
I'm giving IU spicy.
IU Purdue it usually ends up being pretty spicy between those two games.
But I'm just calling the team spicy. I'm like Purdue, kind of sweet and sour.
Oh, I was going to give IU sweet and sour, but it's more sour than sweet.
I don't know if there's a lot of sweet.
Yeah. Although I don't know if Purdue's had enough sour to call them sweet and sour. They've had a couple drop games, but they've been pretty good.
But we have your coverage, and even if we have to borrow some of our friends and their frequencies, we're going to cover it. We've got Purdue on 1190 AM, IU 92.3 FM, high school basketball 1380 The Fan. All right, so also coming up on the show, we have Seth Coffing, who will join us, the Bishop Luers boys basketball coach, to give us a preview of tonight's Luers-Wayne matchup. Also, a chance to visit with Griff. Of course, there's things happening in college football, and a lot of fans and boosters, they almost consider the period of December through February as important as what happens in late August through December. And the reason for that is because some teams, when they actually take the field, they kind of stink. but everybody has a good offseason. There's always optimism with some of the players you've signed and everything. But for Indiana now, they come off a good season. So how do they follow it up? They're going to have some key places to replace players. And so we're going to ask Griff, how does Indiana replace the talent they brought in to have that kind of first year under Curt Cignetti? And with the bar raised, how does Indiana meet that standard now that so many of those James Madison players end up departing.
A lot of super seniors there that contributed a lot to the Signetti program.
Quarterback, offensive line, defensive positions. Secondary. They had so many players that really played key roles on that Indiana team that were essentially one and done. I mean, they came in and had a grad year, a senior year. And so what's Indiana got coming back? What did they do to replace the talent they're losing? Is there a chance Indiana could be a better football team next year?
Yeah.
They're going to play a tougher schedule because everybody had to bring up that Indiana had a soft schedule this year. And, yes, they didn't have the toughest Big Ten schedule, but that's not their fault. They scheduled non-conference games. The problem is they didn't schedule tough non-conference games because the time they scheduled those games, they didn't know what kind of team they were going to have, and you didn't know how tough the Big Ten schedule was going to be. Because if you looked at that schedule 4 years ago and you see Michigan, Nebraska, Washington, you're thinking that's a pretty tough Big Ten schedule. It turned out maybe not so much, but next year you get Oregon in there and you get Penn State and you get a few others. I mean, it's going to be a difficult schedule for Indiana. So we'll talk to Griff coming up in about 30 minutes from now. Also on the way, hour number 2, Nathan Baird. He'll give us Purdue's perspective on tonight's game against the Indiana Hoosiers. And Greg Rakestraw will give us perspective on everything because the man is an encyclopedia of knowledge, knows, so many different topics you can just throw at him, and he'll come up with all types of data and information.
Yeah, it's kind of almost like talking to Chat GPT or something.
Yeah.
One of those. It just always has the right answer.
Like you go online and you type in a question. I want to know who will win Indiana girls basketball state titles. Send. And all of a sudden, all the data comes out. Well, this team is probably going to play this team in the semi-state. And since they had a game that already was decided by 2 points, and so-and-so scored only 14 points, she'll score 18 this time, and that team will win. That's the kind of stuff you get from Greg Rakestraw. He is basically, he might be AI. I don't know.
He might be. We'll have to ask him.
Yeah, we'll ask him. But that's a great lineup of guests. We've got it all the way up till 6 o'clock. And like I said, we've always got you as a guest because you can always text us your questions, comments, or suggestions, 260-447-8500. So last night, we had our Support the Fort night, and I will say the city came out almost 3,000 strong at the Coliseum. It was loud, it was vocal, there was plenty of energy in the building, and unfortunately, for the second time in front of a big crowd, the Mastodons did not shoot the ball well. And I don't know if it's just overhype or you want so bad to play well that you shoot poorly. Like you're really wanting a shot to go in instead of just letting it flow. But the Dons had their worst shooting game by far of the season against Cleveland State. And Cleveland State's a great defensive team, but their MO is they turn you over. They force a high number of turnovers. They lead the Horizon League in steals per game. They're a team that forces mistakes into turnovers, into transition baskets. That's what they do. Offensively, they're very average. But defensively, they generally use pressure to score points. And the Dons really, I thought, played a terrific game last night. They just did not hit a stinking shot. I mean, it was frustrating.
Lid on the basket.
You could hear it in my voice.
Yeah, I could. Trust me.
Another shot in, that's not
good. Short, long.
That's going to be off. There's
the iron.
Another clank. What the hell's going on here? It was bad.
Yeah.
And, and it's not the for those that haven't followed Purdue Fort Wayne basketball, that's totally out of character because they are built with guys that can shoot the basketball. I mean, they've got like 3 or 4 guys that on the season are hitting over 40% from three. As a team, they went into last night like 4th in the country in 3-point field goal percentage. And that's 4th in the country out of like 364 Division I basketball teams. This is an elite shooting team that somehow last night only managed to make 5 of 32 shots. And if you were there and you saw the game, they didn't take bad shots. They didn't force anything. What happens is the Dons put pressure on their opponents to take away one of two things. You've either got to spray and pick up shooters, and be exposed perhaps in the middle of the lane, or you've got to clog up the lane, hoping you can force turnovers by double teams, triple teams in the middle of the paint, and not let that ball handler who gets into the lane kick out for open threes. Or you can recover and close out quickly enough to put pressure on the shot. Last night, I thought the Dons executed offensively because they took advantage of what Cleveland State couldn't cover, which was the perimeter. And the Dons were unselfish and gave up some shots to get better shots. And then they get wide open looks and clank, clank, boom. They did not hit anything. 5 of 32, which is under 16% from three-point range. A 40% shooting team. And I was just kind of in disbelief and highly frustrated because all it took was a couple of those threes to drop, and I felt like the Dons were going to win the game. But, you know, Adam, you've heard me use the phrase the money ball because I think there's certain moments, like there was one where the Dons scored, and I think they got a slam dunk, and then they came down and forced a turnover, a live ball turnover. They headed into the front court. They kicked it out to the trailer. And I think it was Jalen Jackson got a wide open look from three. All he's got to do is bust the bottom of the cup with that three, and the crowd is just going insane. All the momentum comes on the Don side. I mean, that's a game changer. And I think at the time it was a 7-point game. It would have been down to 4 if that shot would have gone in. It didn't go in. And what happens? Cleveland State comes right back the other way and gets a quick three. And now instead of it being a 4-point game, it's a 10-point game. And that's the way the game went last night, right?
Yeah.
Terribly frustrating. And because Cleveland State decided they were going to pack the paint, they were not going to let Rasheed Bello or Jalen Jackson have finishes at the rim. Every time that Bello or Jackson got into the lane, they were swarmed. And they wanted to force them to find someone else to score. And unfortunately, not only did Jalen have a really tough shooting night, but he had a lot of teammates that had a tough shooting night. Rasheed Bello was the best three-point shooter. He was 3 for 7, but the rest of the team was 2 for 25. 2 for 25.
Yeah.
Adam, that's 8% from 3. 8%. What happened to this team last night? Unbelievable.
I really wish I knew. I wish I had an answer. I think there is something to what you're saying in front of the big crowds and wanting to perform at your very best and letting that affect your shot and your natural rhythm. But at the same time, I think they just missed a lot of shots. I mean, it was just a bad night.
I mean, at some point it does become a little mental because, you know, you're not making them, your teammate's not making them, and then you're the next one to shoot it.
And
you want to bail out a teammate that's missed, and you want to be the one that drops in the shot that gets the team going, and then there's pressure on your shot. They just didn't have the flow. But here, I mean, I looked at these games. Here's the last 4 games for the Mastodons prior to last night from three-point land. They were 14 for 30 against Detroit Mercy.
Yeah.
47%. They were 16 of 33 against Wright State. That's 49%. They were 10 of 15 against Oakland for 67%. And they were 10 of 22 last Saturday against IU Indy for 46%. Bottom line is, they've been consistently good from the three-point line, and then were just horrible shooting the ball last night. Unbelievable. 4th best in the country, and they end up shooting 5 for 32. And all it would have taken was 8 threes instead of 5, and they right in the game.
Yeah.
And if they hit 30% of the three-point shots, they win the game by multiple possessions. It's unfortunate because a great crowd, and a big thank you to those of you that did come out to support the Mastodons last night. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you decide to come back and take in another game. The Dons here obviously have an important stretch. This reminds me, remember, what's it been, 3 years ago? The Mastodons were almost in the same point. They were hovering around 500 in the conference. I think they were like 5-4, 6-4. And then the calendar turned to February. And what did the Dons do? They won 10 straight games. They got on fire, went on a roll, beat some really good teams, and just climbed the standings. And by the final day, All they had to do was they had to beat somebody and hope Cleveland State got beat, and the Dons would be co-champions. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. The Mastodons made the move from the middle of the pack all the way to the top in February. And this team's fully capable of it. And if you saw the game last night, you probably, hopefully, left thinking, this team plays really well. They play hard. They play unselfish. They just can't shoot. And it's like, and if all you saw was last night, that's probably what you'd think. And I can tell you, statistically, look at it. That's not the Mastodons, what you saw last night.
No, and hopefully you did see some flashes of quality play that will inspire you to come back and check them out again, because they can play a lot better than they did.
They can play. They can get it out and go. They can play. I mean, Cleveland State's the number one defensive team, but I didn't think it was. I thought early on the Dons had to adjust to the length and the physicality of Cleveland State, because, man, they play you physical. Mm-hmm. And the officials were not going to call the fouls. So it was going to be, as someone texted me this morning or messaged me, they felt like they were watching a rugby match. And that's kind of what you had was rugby, maybe more than basketball, because it was that physical. But once the Dons adjusted to the physicality, and again, it's that matter of knowing, are they taking away the inside game, outside game, because you can't usually stop both. And Cleveland State, they gambled that if they took away the inside game, the Mastodons wouldn't shoot 40% from three, and they didn't. They shot under 16%. Just tough night.
Definitely.
By the way, wasn't a tough night for me. I had the play of the night.
Yeah,
I had the play of the night. For those of you that were there, I'm sure you will back this up, that it might have been the play of the year and probably deserved a spot on SportsCenter's top 10. But the cameramen just didn't react as quickly as I did.
Right.
All of a sudden in front of me, a ball ricochets off a player, and it must have come at me 90 miles per hour or better, like a speeding Indy car. And I just threw up the hand and made a one-handed, left-handed grab.
Oh, yeah.
Snagged it. For those of you that listened to the game, this is what it sounded like. And here comes Bello to Jackson. Jackson from up top, drives, splits defenders, puts up the runner, no good. Had it blocked, and the ball comes up to me. Still got it. Ball deflected, and a one-handed, left-handed grab by the radio guy. Biggest cheer of the night, I think. One of the biggest cheers. Did you hear that? I got quite the ovation.
Nice applause there.
Yeah, got a nice ovation for that catch. But no, now, here's the thing. I sit right behind the scores table, and I'm like 3 rows up, elevated, right at midcourt, okay? Pretty easy to identify that I'm the Mastodons radio broadcaster, but apparently it's a little too difficult to actually figure that out. But on TV, I do appreciate how they described because I didn't have a chance to describe anything. I just reached up, grabbed it, and said, it's coming up here. And then why it went quiet for a little while is I had to then find an official to throw it to, and I had to make, of course, a perfect chest pass to that. It would have been embarrassing to actually make a one-handed catch and then not be able to get it 20 feet to the floor and try to pass it. But no, here's the way it actually sounded on the ESPNU broadcast last night.
Here's where Wayne will keep it. It ricochets off of the Vikings and out of bounds.
That was a great catch over there by a gentleman with the headset on in front of the computer.
He was ready.
Yeah, he was. That's what I worry about if the ball ever comes over here towards you. I mean, I'm going to have to be quick with my hands.
Voice of the Mastodons over there, ready to go.
A gentleman with a headset on in front of a computer? Come on, man.
You're just some random guy.
I mean, you don't have to know my name, but at least the gentleman with a headset on with his computer.
I like that. Shout out to the other guy that said the voice of the Dons later on.
The voice of the Mastodons made that play.
There you go.
Got a little FaceTime on ESPNU last night too.
A little national television exposure.
I can now say that I have been on ESPN for a college basketball game.
Yes, you have. Did you have your Sports Rush shine at the ready?
No, I did not.
Oh,
no.
All right.
But I did have my nice Christopher James menswear suit.
Shout out to Christopher James.
Yeah, Chris, always great. I just sent him video as proof that his suit got on TV last night. But a big thanks to everybody that showed up because it was a fun night, just a bad outcome. Dons will head to Milwaukee next. That comes up on Sunday, 2 o'clock, and 1:45 we'll have the pregame show here at 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. It's Seth Coffing who's going to join us next. We got to talk some Luers basketball. They get prepped to take on Wayne, and the coach of the Bishop Luers Knights will be our guest when we return on the Sports Rush, 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM.
This is Maria Marquesano, head women's basketball coach at Purdue Fort Wayne, and you're listening to the Sports Rush with Brett Rump on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM.
Purdue Fort Wayne women's basketball on the road tonight, finishing up a 2-game road trip there at Robert Morris. We'll have that score on our Parkview Sports Medicine postgame show coming up later tonight. I imagine our next guests probably have little interest in what's going on in Moon Township. It is Bishop Luers coach Seth Coffing. And, Coach, I got to ask you about last night, because last night was a case in point of a basketball team that I didn't think played poorly, but the shots didn't fall. And a lot of fans will say, geez, they must have really played bad to only score 58 points. But those type of nights happen where you can execute, you can actually run what looks like a pretty effective offense, but when the ball doesn't go in, it's all for naught.
Coach, I assume you're talking about the PFW men?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I watched it from home because it was a little bit late for me having a game tonight. But they had a lot of open looks for sure, and I think that if you ask Coach Coffin, he wasn't disappointed with the looks that they got. They just didn't go down, and sometimes that happens, but they definitely fought defensively.
Yeah, it's a crazy night when you look at the percentages on the season because they just didn't match with what the Dons did last night. Let's talk about your Bishop Luers team because right now 13-2 on the season. You're ranked number 4 in 2A, taking on Wayne. Both of you are unbeatens in the Summit Athletic Conference. And, coming into the season, we knew about the Truesdales. And I think most of the high school basketball fans in the area knew about the Truesdales. But I'm fascinated by the number of role players. And I call them role players. That might not be fair. They might be more support players. But the other contributors that you have and just how deep it goes with your roster.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the biggest difference between last year and this year, and obviously just the experience that we were able to gain in some of those big games last year. But, our depth is definitely shown through in a lot of different areas and a lot of different games this year. You call them role players, but somebody like Danny Kelly, who, a different year at Luers or a different year at a different school, he's getting a ton of shots and more looks, and, he does a little bit of everything for us. And you got A.L. Taylor inside who plays really important interior defense for us, rebounds the ball really well, and is able to finish around the rim. And, he's capable of scoring too, but it's not something we really need from him. So we got a bunch of guys that understand their role. Carmani Davis spreads the floor for us, able to shoot the 3-ball really, really well. And then we just got guys off the bench that that's the biggest difference, I think, in this team is they come in, they know their roles, they give us really, really good energy, and you can't tell the difference if it's, a couple minutes or 10 minutes. They're going to provide the same type of energy, and they're not going to have a different attitude about it if they're not getting the type of minutes that I'm sure that they would want. But, it's just the flow of the game sometimes.
If you needed to scout personnel for Wayne, it wouldn't have been too difficult to just go back and look at last year's notes because this team returned a lot of their key talent from a very good team a season ago. This team's got a lot of elite talent. I mean, when you talk about Chase Barnes and how he can beat you both on the drive and from behind the 3-point line, Preston Comer, I think he's a real sleeper on this Wayne team because he hits daggers, 3-point daggers. And then Dillard, his blue-collar work that he does. It's a tough team to defend because they've got so many very effective parts.
They definitely do. They're definitely a lot like last year. Lewis last year was their point guard and really kind of ran the show for him. And Barnes has basically taken over that role pretty seamlessly, and they just haven't missed a beat with him there. And, the thing that I'm always most impressed with them is how well they defend. They guard really, really well. They put a lot of pressure on you. They got a couple kids. We talk about role players that people probably don't talk about enough for them. Williams Thomas and the Green kid, are playing extremely high-level basketball for him. You mentioned Dillard, and I think that he gets overlooked. I mean, the kid puts up a double-double almost every night. He's somebody we got to make sure that we find every single time a shot goes up, and we can't let him get too deep in the post because he's going to finish right away. So they're really good. You know, we have a lot of respect for them. Nobody's beaten them in a long time in the SAC, and you know, we're hoping we're that team tonight, but we're going to have to play a really good ball game.
I'm wondering what type of game we're going to see tonight, because I think both teams like to get it up and down the floor, and both teams can score points, but both teams also can lock down defensively and do a lot of different things defensively to shut down or limit their opponents. What type of game are you expecting?
Well, I definitely think we're going to get up and down. I mean, it's going to be a lot of transition. We're hoping to obviously not allow them to get out, you know, get numbers in transition. I'm sure they're thinking the same thing about us. You know, we do. We both have the ability to lock down defensively, and I think that's been the biggest difference for us this year. You know, we've had stretches where we've just played extremely really good defense. You think about the Warsaw game down at Richmond. We had a stretch in the third quarter. I think we had 7 straight stops or something like that. So we have the capabilities. It's something that we've been really focusing on, and obviously they do too. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little bit more grinded out than maybe expected, but at the same time, I think, you know, there's a lot of good athletes that are going to try to get downhill and get things at the rim.
We have to, you know, the pressure is on, Seth. You've got to keep that undefeated conference record because you don't want to be the first one in the household to lose a conference game this year.
Yeah, I mean, we're playing at the same time tonight, which is pretty unusual. I can't say that I'm going to be able to check or score at halftime or anything like that. So we're just going to hope that when we're both done that we can send each other texts congratulating each other and keep that roll going.
Well, we'll keep an eye on it while we call the game, but I'm looking forward to it tonight because a lot of talent will be on the floor in a huge Summit Athletic Conference game as the Knights visit the Wayne Generals. Always appreciate the time, especially on a game day. Good luck tonight. Good luck the rest of the season, and we'll see you in a couple of hours.
Thanks, Brett. I encourage everyone to come out. I know that's on stream, but it's going to be one heck of a high school basketball atmosphere there at Wayne tonight. Absolutely.
Well said. Seth Coffing joining us here on the Sports Rush. And, of course, when you go to the game and you listen to Coach Coffing, the other thing you have to remember is take your ear pods.
Yeah, bring your portable AM/FM radio if you want.
We portable. You know, I had somebody say to me, they were searching their house for a transistor or portable radio. Couldn't find one.
Yeah, you know what's crazy?
And somebody said, why don't you just use your phone and stream it? Oh, brilliant idea.
Yeah, do that instead. It's a lot easier, but if you really do want to, they still sell them for about $10 at your big box store.
Really?
I have one.
Do you really?
Hey, if I ever have to check the station, if I'm at home in my office and if there's anything going on and I need to check the AM or FM frequency, right there. Boom.
I do not own a radio.
Says the radio broadcaster.
The radio broadcaster, and I do not. So I'm the guy that's got the ear pods and the phone and the computer. So I'll have nights where I've got one game on the phone, one game on my laptop, and another game on my television. Multitasking with multimedia.
You are in the sarcophagus of sports media.
Nothing. All right, we got to take a break. Who we got? We got Griff coming up. Griff coming up next. Yeah, we don't want to keep Griff waiting.
Can't do that.
And so we will talk to Shannon Griffith, get an update of what's happening with Indiana football here in the offseason, what we might have missed, what we can learn. It all comes from Shannon Griffith next here on the Sports Rush on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Nathan Baird from the Indy Star joins us in hour number 2. Also, Greg Rakestraw from ISC Sports Network. Before we wrap things up at 6 o'clock and get you into your sports weekend, and, of course, thought this would be a good time. Fridays, he actually comes out and gets out of his jammies, and so I thought this would be a good day to have Shannon Griffith because, you know, he's in the habit of actually working on Fridays. So I thought we'll have him come on the show and talk a little Indiana football. It is Mr. Friday Night in the Fall, Shannon Griffith. How are you today, Griff?
Hey, Ralphie, what's going on? Doing well. I just got out of my jammies like
I gotta ask about IU because, you know, they've reset the standard, and it's amazing how much the bar has shifted of expectations from Indiana fans with Curt Cignetti's first year. But, you know, we got to be honest, a lot of the players that put that season together were guys that he brought in, and they were kind of one-year rentals. I mean, they're going to have some holes to fill. They're going to have some key positions where they need to get some talent into Bloomington. And it's very hard sometimes to follow all the details during a busy college basketball season of what's happening with the transfer portal, what's happening with recruiting. So I thought, the guy who's actually got the gig now following Indiana football should know. So I'll get Griff on. What's Indiana's status? When the season ended, what'd the roster look like? What were some of the key needs?
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head with a lot of the individuals that were kind of the one-year wonders, you could say. But they got some key commitments from their own roster with Aiden Fisher, the linebacker, announcing that he was coming back. There were a couple other big ones that stuck around instead of going to the NFL. And then add to it, you lose Curtis Rourke, who by far had one of the greatest years an Indiana quarterback's had in a long time. And, oh, by the way, no one knew it, he had a torn ACL he played with all year. So they were able to go out and get Fernando Mendoza, a quarterback that played out at Cal, had over 3,000 yards passing. His younger brother, Alberto, is on the Hoosiers roster as a quarterback, and he was a freshman this past year. So they were able to re-solidify that room. Now Fernando will have 2 years coming out of it. And the portal that Kurt Signetti last year had so much success with now, granted, it was a James Madison portal. It would appear this year he's getting more Power 4 talent, and the portal has been ranked as high as number 4 as it turns to all the rankings and such. But I just think overall right now, with what he's brought in, what he's got returning, is going to help Indiana try to take that next step, which is always the hardest, and it's that word consistency. Can they consistent go out and be a program in the Big Ten that is talked in the upper echelon of the Big Ten?
I think one thing that's important for Indiana, because last year I don't think they had depth on their roster. They were able to get some key guys to start for them, but I don't think it was a real deep roster that Kurt Signetti put together. But as you build the program, you're going to have to bring in some higher grade freshmen to try to develop to give you the depth as you move into the future. And so, I think that's one of the keys for Indiana in their progress here. But the other thing, I also saw something about the Notre Dame offensive lineman. Did that close? Is that deal done, or is that still on the wish list for IU?
Yeah, Pat Coogan, who was started at center for Notre Dame this past year, he's got it down between Indiana, which he is on campus as of right now, and then he's heading to Ann Arbor on Saturday. From all sources and everything else that goes into it, they have an excellent chance of landing him. But as you know, they're going to have to go up against the likes of Michigan to secure his services. And if they can do that, it goes right to the fact of every year you talk about Indiana in depth, it's always at the offensive line. They do not have the depth that they have normally had or normally need to have. And this past year, their offensive linemen played very, very well. They suffered a major injury to Drew Evans during the season. They had to bring in one of the backups, and it wasn't that they performed bad in the last part of the season. It just wasn't at the same standard, perhaps, that it was earlier in their inability to protect Rourke in the last few games of the year.
Geography won't make a huge difference here. He's out of Chicago, Coogan out of Chicago, but a 6'5", 310-pounder. out of the Chicago suburbs, went to Marist High School. I think that's a Catholic school, isn't it? He's leaving Catholicism. What's going on with man?
Yeah, he's gone from Catholic high school to the Catholic college, and now I guess he's going to spread his wings and see what the real world's about. But if they could get that kid, he is a legit, like you just said, 6'5", 300-plus pound lineman, and that's the one thing that Indiana, I say, has struggled at times, is being able to get the big-sized kid that also is a highly thought-of player that fulfills the needs that you need and then some. So if they could land him, he would be an excellent fit for Katie that just graduated. And matter of fact, he signed to go to Barstool Sports up in Chicago and forgone his aspirations of the NFL. So, again, the other thing too, Brett, is 14 kids of their signing class, of this 2025 signing classes, enrolled early in January to be there on campus to go through winter workouts. My projection is Cignetti will have at least 80 to 90 kids on his spring roster. And so that's a number that you really is unheard of, because you're usually, very depleted when you get to spring ball. Well, with having those kids come in, along with the portal kids coming in, he's going to have a pretty deep roster at all the positions, and he'll be able to evaluate all these young players that we talked about, the freshmen coming in, and what they may be able to do. I'm sure there may be a couple that will fit themselves in the top two on either side of the ball.
Things never worked out for Taven Jackson at quarterback. What did you see that just never clicked for Taven in Bloomington?
Well, there's no question the kid has a ton of talent. He's got a very good arm. He throws mechanically. There's nothing wrong with his setup and delivery. I just think he struggled in the mental part of the game and being able to apply things from the classroom, so to speak, onto the field of play when the bullets were flying at you. At times, there were times that he looked the part and he played the part, and there were times that you just shook your head about, what's this kid doing? But he did what he had to do last year for Indiana in the backup role. He came in against Washington and played a very decent game that Indiana was able to win. But for whatever reason, it just never transferred from the practice field to the game field in terms of the full expectations of a Division I Big Ten quarterback, especially in today's college football, because there are a lot of reads going on and a lot of things are being decided as the snap happens.
When you look at quarterback, you mentioned Fernando Mendoza, a highly sought-after transfer out of Cal. What I'm seeing is he might have a little stronger arm than Rourke, and he's more of a dual-threat quarterback. What are you hearing?
Well, I do think he is a kid that enables Indiana to help the offensive line by moving the launch point. What I mean by that is never just dropping straight back, which Indiana did 95% of the time with Curtis Rourke, mainly because of that knee. With Mendoza, it gives you a chance to put him out on the perimeter, give him run-pass options, employ some bootlegs, naked bootlegs, and then potentially integrate what he can in the run game. If that appears, it appears that he has some pretty good speed from some of the clips that I've seen of him. But man, he threw for over 3,000 yards, and that's a lot of yards in a 12-game season.
Talking to Shannon Griffith here on a Friday edition of the Sports Rush. So when you look overall at the roster, is there the potential that it could have been upgraded and it could actually be a better roster going into the spring and summer than maybe the one that he had a year ago?
I do, in the sense of what they were able to add through the portal, especially on defense. You know, they picked up a big-time corner from Pitt that I think is going to fit well with D'Angelo Pons in terms of their ability to play out on an island, man for man. They brought some kids back that actually left a year ago, one of them being a safety, Lewis Moore, who had played quite a bit prior to Signetti's arrival. But Mississippi offered him, I guess, a lot of money and opportunity to go down there. So he went down to check it out and found out that he didn't like it. But he can't come back, which is a huge get in terms of their secondary. So I do think their secondary was strengthened through the portal. And I do also think that their defensive line was strengthened through the portal. That was one thing last year heading into the spring and summer break that they were very deficient in, and that was up front in their defensive line, and they were able to add C.J. West late in the summer. That definitely added a boost. So by those two things, and then, of course, keeping Brian Haynes around, you know, getting him signed to a new deal in a season that Penn State, Notre Dame, Miami, and now Ohio State are looking for defensive coordinators. I guarantee you he was in the names mentioned as possible replacement at all those places.
Griff, always a pleasure to talk to you, and hope you're finding things to keep yourself busy. Comets, are you a regular at the Comet games this year, or have you got the time?
Not as much with this knee that I had replaced, but I like the fact they're on a 7-game win streak, and big weekend coming up here in the Fort with a couple games at home back to back. So let's see if they can push it to maybe 9 or 10 games straight.
You have told your physical therapist that you have work to do in the fall, right? That knee's got to be 100% come August.
Yeah, we've got the oil ready and, you know, all the things necessary to carry up the equipment or carry down the equipment.
I put a request in for those places that do not have elevators if they could provide a pulley so I could get my color guy up to the press box, because it may take that.
Well, you know what? You've got those electronic seats that maybe they can put in that carry you up the stairs or down the stairs.
You ever see like when they transport cows and they put them in a harness, right, and they're hanging from a crane? That'll be Griff getting to our high school football games this fall. Oh Lord, you're like the $6 million man. They just keep rebuilding every part along the way.
I may have to make a comeback.
Hey, Griff, always a pleasure. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you again.
You too. Bye-bye.
That is Shannon Griffith joining us here on a Friday edition of the Sports Rush. Of course, coming up tonight, speaking of Indiana, we got to talk some hoops. Indiana, Purdue. Yeah, you've got the big one in college basketball taking place at Mackey Arena tonight. And, I don't know what's going to be the motivator for IU. It seems like they have to hit kind of bottom before they find a way to motivate themselves to bounce back. This will be an intriguing game. Can they handle the crowd? Are they, what kind of pride do they have as a team, not as individuals? Because I think every one of them wants to succeed individually, but do they have pride for that name that's across the front of the jersey? Do they owe it to their coach? Do they have a close enough relationship with their head coach that they want to win for him? Because I got to think that Indiana basketball players are hearing all the social media buzz of what is going on, what's being said about Mike Woodson, and if they've got any pride or sense of loyalty to him, we'll see it on the court. And tonight would be the time for Indiana to show it, taking on an in-state rival. What I don't think happens is no longer do you have that rivalry based on a sense of owning your turf. It's not like Indiana and Purdue are playing for state pride. I don't think that's there anymore.
No.
I mean, Indiana's just, or Purdue, or whatever side you're looking at, I think it's just another game on the schedule to prepare for. I don't think... it took Bob Knight, Gene Cady, and some of those, fierce, animated coaches to kind of build this rivalry, but to me it's faded, and I'm not sure exactly what if you agree with me, if you feel like there's a point where it started to fizzle out. Let us know, 260-447-8500. But do you agree, right or wrong, that this battle, this rivalry doesn't have the same intensity, luster, or motivation for the players involved as it did maybe 10, 15 years ago or more?
Yep, you said it. We want to hear from you. Parkview Sports Medicine text line 260-447-8500.
We'll take a break. We come back. We've got a whole nother hour to take you home on a Friday. We've got to talk about the Pacers. They're going to be busy. Caitlin Clark has a date, kind of a homecoming of sorts. Also, Mastodon women in action tonight. Men fall short last night. And Nathan Baird and Greg Rakestraw will be joining us as guests. It's a lot to fit into an hour, and we're going to do our best to get it done when we come back. It's the Sports Rush Friday edition on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM.